Our city clerk is on vacation, and we have our assistant city clerk, Laura Aguilar. If you could please call the meeting to order.
Good evening. Mayor Denise Delmar.
Here.
Mayor Pro Tem John Harabedian.
Here.
Council members Rachel Arizmendi.
Present.
Councilmember John Capocha.
Here.
And Councilmember Jean Goss.
Here.
Mayor, you have a quorum. You may proceed with city business.
Thank you. If you'll all stand and join Councilmember John Capocha in the pledge.
Okay, please place your right hand over your heart. Ready, begin. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Remain standing, please, and I'll have a little invocation. Dear wise and loving God in heaven, we thank you for the many blessings that you've bestowed in our beloved city of Sierra Madre. We pray for your continued blessings and pray that we never fail to appreciate all the wonderful things about our community. For those that are entrusted with leadership, please grant us the wisdom to govern judiciously and help us to recognize and respect the diverse needs and desires of our citizens. As we deliberate, help us to meet the challenge of balancing short-term concerns with our goal of ensuring that our village of the foothills is a special place for generations to come. In the name of God we pray, amen.
Thank you. Thank you for that. Next on our agenda is the approval of the agenda. Do we have anybody who would like to make alterations of the agenda at this time? Oh, I'm sorry.
No.
Not me.
Can I have a motion to move forward?
Move to approve.
I'll second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Motion carries. Next on we have approval of the meeting minutes from May 22nd, 2018. Did all of the council have an opportunity to review? Do we have any comments or questions or changes?
Not for me. I'll move for approval.
I'll second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
So moved. And next up, we have the mayor and city council reports. Who would like to start?
I will. I have none at this time.
No report.
I just have a quick one. Attended the water subcommittee meeting for the COG today, and a lot of discussion was on the upcoming November ballot measure for clean water. And I just really don't understand how anybody in the San Gabriel Valley would vote for this. It's based on a bad premise because we captured 95% of our storm water already. And as far as the pollution controls, I mean, the permit is based on measures, TMDLs, that were made up by the regional board, where these TMDLs are not on the federal 303D list. So I don't know, you could be asked to pay on average about $100 a month, and I doubt that any citizen out there will realize any benefit whatsoever from it. So I'm just throwing that out there, but it's going to be, the county is going to vote, I believe, on July 10th at their meeting.
Can I ask a question on that? So do you think we should have a discussion on that before to take a position? And I asked just because when I was at the latest SCAG convention, there was lobbying from both ends.
Yeah.
You know, there's cities in the San Gabriel Valley that are kind of all over the spectrum.
Yeah.
So do you think we should be weighing in on it?
I would like to. I would like to take a stance to say that it is not in the benefit of our constituents to pay up to roughly $100 a year, because there is very little benefit to them. I would take that position.
Maybe, huh?
So
Yeah.
we initially had that agendized for the next meeting on the 24th, but we learned we'll have council members not present, so we moved it to the second meeting in July. We could keep it on the next meeting without all council present if that's the council's preference.
I won't be here, so I can't make my argument forcefully.
Honestly, that's the reason we
We
moved
can
it
just do
back.
the first week of July then, right?
So the
Plenty of
first-
time.
First meeting in July is a joint meeting with the library, so the next available agenda is the second meeting in
So
July.
it'd be after the county approves
Yeah.
it.
Well, I mean, it could be a short discussion too. I mean, I don't know how you guys feel about it. I just feel very strongly that this is an incredibly misguided effort. And that's my opinion from just being involved with this MS4 and going through the Clean Waters, Clean Beaches effort before. And there's a whole bunch of other reasons I don't like it, but those are the main two, is that we capture 95% of our water already, so why would we build anything? And all the TMDLs for the San Gabriel River and the Rio Hondo River are not on the federal impaired waters list. This is stuff that was dreamed up by the regional board here.
I think it's worth it to bring it to our council to make a statement on it, and whether you're not here, and or if we make it as a short agenda item, I'm echoing, agenda item on the joint meeting, I think that would be fine too. But I think timing is of the essence, and we need to make sure we do that before the Board of Supervisors meeting.
I would like to put it on our joint meeting.
Joint meeting?
We'll be very short. And Councilmember Capoccia promises to be very short on his comments. He's going to have them all practiced and written down, and timed.
Well, if I do that, it'll take longer.
Yeah.
Then I'll remember all the reasons I don't like it.
Okay.
Okay.
And I don't have any other,
Just a brief report. I had the pleasure of being a member, visiting with the Library Board of Trustees as the new liaison of the Board of Trustees, and the meeting was a particularly long one because they were discussing not only their thoughts on our last meeting and their thoughts on this evolving issue involving our new library, but also the budgetary changes that have been taking place, and was very impressive with what that board is doing, what the library is doing right now, and I'll just reiterate that I'm really looking forward to that joint meeting. I think it's going to be very productive.
And for my report, I will let you know that I have met with the chair of the Board of Trustees of Library, and we've set the agenda. So it'll be an interesting night, that's for sure. Any other comments from the council? If not, I forgot to go to closed session. Do you have any remarks?
Yes, thank you, Mayor. Just to let the community know, the council did meet in closed session this evening before the open session, and the council received a briefing on the terms of the settlement agreement with CETT. That case, CETT versus City of Sierra Madre, has reached a settlement agreement. There is a written settlement. The settlement terms are fairly simple. Just to go over them quickly for the community, one of the terms is that the original property that was considered and approved by the Planning Commission will be reconsidered by the council. There's no promise to rescind it, but that the council will consider rescinding that, such that the original Planning Commission decision on 610 Baldwin Court would remain. Additional terms of the settlement agreement are that both sides bear their own legal costs. We stop going forward in litigating this. And the last provision is that for an 18-month period, the CETT can submit new proposals for their various lots under the terms of the original One Carter settlement agreement, which was approved in 2010. And so that's just a recap. There is a written agreement in place. The other item of closed session is that the council received a briefing from its labor negotiator regarding the status of labor negotiations with two of the city's unions, POA and CEA. And that is the end of my report, Mayor.
And I would like to report that Councilmember Arizmendi did not attend the first part with the CEET because she had to recuse herself from that, but did join us for the second part. Okay, next we have public comment for any items not on the agenda. If you'd like to come forward, please state your name.
Good evening, Mayor Del Mar and council members. I am Darlene Papa with Lifeline for Pets, lifelineforpets.org, rescue organization, and we brought Baxter back. We had him last month. He's looking for a home, and this is Kim, his foster mom, and he's an adorable miniature pinscher, and Kim is going to tell you a little bit more about Baxter.
Okay, this is Baxter. He's 7 years old. He's 15 pounds. He loves to go for walks. He's excellent at the dog park. He loves other dogs, and he's just a great little dog. He gets along with other dogs. He loves people. He loves everyone. This is Baxter. Thank you.
Did you get him on TV and everything? So there you go. We got him. We see him. He's adorable.
So if anyone is interested in adopting Baxter, please give us a call. We are lifelineforpets.org, and we had flyers in the front. So the information to see him again and adopt him is there. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi there.
Hi.
Hi, City Council. Lori Byard, live on Highland, and Becky lives on Merrill. We were here 2 weeks ago about the concern with 127 East Highland. We were hoping that it would be agendized because we haven't heard anything back. 2 weeks ago, we reported a lot of concern that when this property is bulldozed, that the vermin that are in there is going to spread to our community, into our homes. I'm 3 houses away. I have other neighbors who are 2 houses away and across the street and 4 houses away, but they couldn't be here. But there's also what I've learned is, and I'm not an expert on this, but the house should be tented before bulldozed. I don't know if that's true. The rumor around the community is the people that are expressing interest in buying the property, and this is a rumor, are not interested. I don't know who it is, if this is a rumor, but they're not interested in abating or tenting the property because then they would have to deal with dead rats. So there are also a couple of old cars on the property that I'm sure are housing a lot of awful things. So we're concerned about the rats, roaches, whatever else is in there. I would invite the city council, this is undescribable, to go by 127 and just walk it. There's a driveway next to it and you'll be shocked. It's just, you can't even describe it. I know the city has red tagged it, but we're very, very concerned about this. Would like the city to really help us and protect us. We don't know what our rights are in terms of our being protected, if they will be required to do something before a permit, and if they are, if we can get a copy of it in case a bulldozer shows up. I mean, quite frankly, you know, I was here talking about Miramonte, and we had people doing things that weren't on the permit, and they just paid the small fine. And we don't want that to happen. It's bad enough when it's a construction or violation of something that's beautiful, but when it's possibly a health hazard, I mean, it's really, really bad. The house has been vacant for a long time. There's holes in the roof. God knows what's in there. And the backyard is atrocious. So I'm rambling because I just really want some help and an update. So anything to do, we'd certainly like to hear some help back. Thanks.
So I don't think you were here at the end of the last city council meeting when we did direct our city staff to make sure that all the precautions were in place for that.
I did hear that afterwards.
Yeah.
But we haven't heard anything.
I don't think the city would be announcing anything. They're just going to take care of it. But you can always contact the city manager and ask, when it's going to take place, because we don't know. We don't know when it's going to happen yet.
Okay.
Yeah. So
we've done that. We've tried to do that. We just want to make sure that somebody is going to be our ears and eyes during the summer if some of us aren't here and they just don't do it. And then
I have complete faith that the city manager now knows that this is an important item, and he and his crew will make sure that everything is taken care of.
Okay.
Yeah. So you're good.
Hi, I'm Becky Farmer. I spoke with you last time. Good evening. I just want to reinforce what Lori said. And if you do take a walk over there, you will be astounded. There's no way that you could even tent the house without cleaning out the backyard first, which is like another house full of furniture and junk and garbage and laundry. And there's also a separate garage, which is packed full of stuff too, and that also should be tented. Lori's been on the phone constantly, has not heard back from the city manager, respectfully. And I have spoken with the county health department, who informed me that the fencing part of this is very important, regardless of what any new owner might wish, because they have a certain kind of fencing that prevents rodents from scurrying away to other people's homes. And I mentioned that in the last year, the rodent issue and the mosquito issue both have been exceedingly bad for us neighbors on Highland and me around the corner on Merrill since that house has been vacant. So it's a really thorny problem, but I was informed by the health department, the county, that the fencing is crucial, and one needs to make sure that they have permits to demolish and to have a dumpster there. So that might be a way to sort of keep track of things. And also, if the city isn't willing to take responsibility for the abatement, which I believe code requires once it's been established that it's a condemned health hazard, that the county will send an inspector out. So
what I'm going to ask is, because I have talked to the city manager about this a couple of times, and I know what they have planned. Obviously, it hasn't gotten to you, so perhaps the city manager can contact Lori, and you can let them know what's going on with the house.
Okay.
Okay?
Thank you for your time.
Because we have been working on it. Thank you. Do we have any other public comments?
I'm Joanne Williams, longtime resident on Colony Drive. I'm here to give you an update on your senior commission. We're not lazy, we're busy, and I want you to know that. We have been challenged with some goals from a master plan from several years ago, and I want you to know that we're concerned with the safety and the physical welfare of our seniors. We are looking to provide good environments for them, adequate transportation, physical and educational activities are provided, and we keep our seniors well informed, we think. Now, a lot of these things that we have been working on, there have been improvements in several areas. Number one, the lighting around the park house is greatly improved, and there's been some sidewalk repair, and a barrier's now put up so the car can't drive into the park and stop at the front door of the park house. We also have provided 65 new chairs. Guess what the seniors wanted? It's easy, a soft seat and arms on the chairs. So that's what we have now, plus 8 new circular tables. We also have just installed new cabinets in the storage room. A lot of groups need spaces to put things. And we have 3 new bookcases. They are terrific. They're full of books. And it's the greatest lending library in the world. No check-in, no check-out. Just go take some books, take them home, read them, bring them back, hopefully. We've got cowboy stories and romance and mysteries, about 350 books now. The classes that are, a few of the classes that are very popular are the chair yoga class. It meets twice a week, and last month they had 140 participants. And
Wow.
then we also have a strength training class once a week. Bingo, that's a big deal among the seniors. 45 to 60 people last month attended that. A Hawaiian dance class, I don't even want to think about that, but it's very popular. There's also a brain games. I haven't been to that. I think I'd flunk, but a lot of people are enthusiastic. And then the excursions, that's the great one. About 40 people attend these once a month excursions. They have been recently to the Bowers Museum, the Living Desert excursion, the Battleship Iowa. I think it rained on that day, but it was still a good deal. And this month they're going to the Japanese American Museum, all-day trips. We offer some services, movies 2 times a month, free legal service, make an appointment, lunch 5 times a week, that's a big one, $3 a lunch. And there were about 280 lunches served in last month. Then we have Dial-A-Ride and the Roundabout. Now, some of us have ridden recently on the Roundabout, and we are currently concerned with hoping to improve that service, and we'll be making some recommendations in that regard. We want to keep our seniors informed. Here's one way to do it, the Senior Moments. And this comes out once a month. It has all of the activities, information about, but the best thing is it has the menu for the month.
Oh.
So you can pick and choose what you want to eat. Then we also have the calendar of events, and this is in conjunction with the library. It includes not only their services, but some of ours. The trick is to get these into the hands of the seniors. We do use email for some of them. Now, as we have worked this year, we have in our possession a senior resource guide that was developed in 2014. And Mr. Pat Holland, one of our commissioners, was given the job of doing something about it. So the first thing I saw was statistics about it, where there are mistakes, errors, et cetera, et cetera. It's out of date. And so then, at the last meeting, he gave each one of us this to study.
Wow.
Because we have to think of a better kind of a resource guide that's not too expensive and seniors can understand. And I thank you, Pat. I think.
Have you read it all? Have you gone through the whole thing yet?
Will do. Events, we do the holiday luncheon, well attended, the community yard sale just over, the concert in the park coming up. We have Sergeant Pepper's Band and the Older American reception, which was also very well received. Who helps us? Rebecca Silva does, because she's a community services manager, attends our once-a-month meetings, and keeps us on track. Cherry Lou is our senior specialist, and she's not a senior, but she's very, very good at taking care of things. Laura Hines and Clarissa Lowe. Those last three people work out of an office that is the perfect size in my mind for a walk-in closet for clothes. And then on our commission, we have Nina Bartoli, Sally Olson, Anita Thompson, Mr. Pat Holland, and myself. We have 2 openings coming up, and we welcome to have people ask us about being on the commission. It's a good thing to work on, even if you're old, and I am. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening. I'm Carol Parker on Mariposa. I'm here to say a thank you to the fire department and the paramedics for their terrific work. Unfortunately, I got sick in late February, and my local doctor called the ambulance. I was very embarrassed and didn't take it seriously, and they came and got me and did their job and took me off in the daytime to Arcadia Methodist. 5 days later, I came home, and on the 6th day, I got very sick and realized in the middle of the night that I was going to have to call the ambulance. So they came. They were very shocked to see me. I know they probably thought, didn't we just see you? And they took me in the middle of the night back to Arcadia Methodist. I was grouchy, I was fussy, I was in denial. I didn't want to take any clothes. They said, where are they? I said, I don't have any. Where's your ID? I don't have it. I was really upset. How embarrassing to go in an ambulance in the middle of the night when everybody's woken up. However, I stayed at the hospital, and 5 days after that came home again, finding out that nobody knew in the middle of the night that there was the police and the fire and the lights and the noise of the guys coming in the house with everything they wear, clunk, 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 and talking outside and being on the, nobody knew but me. And I really appreciate them. I wish I could apologize for being so difficult to deal with. Going in being sick is bad. Going in an ambulance twice to an emergency room is 2 times too many in a month's time, but thank you. They're really great. I was happy to pay my copay. I just sent it in. Thank you.
Thank you. We're glad you're feeling better. Do we have any other public comment for items not on the agenda? Come on down.
Evening.
Can you state your name?
Impromptu kind of inspiration to talk to you guys, understanding that you're addressing the one Carter, and it's kind of representative, I guess, of issues relating to development as a whole in this community. And
If this is about one Carter, we're
it
gonna-
is not about
Okay.
one Carter. It's actually about water.
Okay.
And my concern in terms of the deliberations that this council is making is, and actually writ large for all of our communities in the foothills and throughout Southern California, is that people don't really understand the trend line for what is happening with our climate, and specifically what's happening to our water supply and our precipitation. Truly. We're not getting it, and I'm concerned about that, because what I see is a major challenge to the sustainability of this organization, of this community, in terms of how we're going to be addressing a rapidly diminishing source of water. And at the same time, we're considering this short-term exigency of adding additional property taxes, development fees, permitting fees, etc., to allow this new any kind of new construction in this town. And the scuttlebutt is that the only reason that we don't have our hillside fully developed is, or my understanding is, that it was because of the moratorium based on connecting new meters. And again, this is was kind of spontaneous. I didn't realize that this was happening. I was taking a little break in the buck, and somebody said, "Oh, they're talking about development in town and water." And I wish I would have had a chance to print this, but this is actually the last 7 years.
You can hand it
Why
to
don't you
the.
just describe it?
Yeah, and just hand it to the city clerk
Well,
and.
you go ahead and pass it around, and it's actually, what it illustrates is, and this is specific to Southern California, what's happening in terms of temperature and precipitation. So you will see two graphs there. These are graphing fall precipitation and fall peak temperature, and the trend lines are absolutely, utterly unmistakable.
So what I'm.
And there's a lot of there's this kind of idea that, oh, we survived the drought. It's now it's going to get back to normal, and it utterly, absolutely, definitively will not. I think the data speaks for itself. If you look at that graph, how can you deny that? So my concern is that we are incorporating this understanding of what's happening with our climate and with our, climate water. So it's temperature, it's water. It's two of the major resources that we rely on, stable climate, etc. Do we really, at this point, I don't see how we can have the water to even justify some of these big delusional lawns and other things that we have, which are a vestige of another time in our weather regime. I really don't. I myself am one of these people that thinks that we should have a lawn tax, because it's a grotesque misuse of a rapidly diminishing resource from my perspective. I cannot drink or feed my household the spring water that we used to rely on, because people are using it to water lawns. I lived in England for 10 years. This is the heartland of lawns, and they don't water their lawns because they don't need to. And we live in a completely different climate. And so lawns, development, anything that's going to actually add to the burden that we have for, a really seriously threatened resource, I think, are you making the responsible decision that properly addresses the long-term necessities of this community by allowing more building.
Thank you. Can we have your name, please?
I'm Vic Aguilar. I'm actually your neighbor. I live across the street from
Okay.
you. So, Solar Vic.
Solar Vic.
Yeah, Vic Aguilar.
So-
Aguilar.
So Vic, if you could tell us where you got that statistics from, the graph? What website is that from?
It's actually from the NOAA. It was compiled by the LA Times. If you look at it, it's all footnoted. Anytime I reference any data, I do a lot of talks and presentations. Everything is footnoted and properly sourced.
And I'm sure that we're going to have a lot of agenda items about the water coming up. We are talking about water rates later today, if you want to stay and listen to that. But we will be talking about our conservation and water going forward. So just stay tuned for that.
Will do.
We'd like to have you back.
We're here for the duration. Yeah.
Okay.
All right. Thanks.
Thank you.
All right.
Do we have anybody else who'd like to address the council in public comment for items not on the agenda? No? Okay. Let's go ahead and proceed with our consent agenda.
Thank you, Mayor. We have one item on consent this evening, adoption of Resolution 18-27 of the City Council of the City of Sierra Madre approving certain demands.
Do we have any questions about that? That's the smallest consent item agenda ever, I think.
It's a record.
Any questions or any public comment on this one consent item? Nobody's running down the podium. Okay. So can we get a motion to approve?
Move to approve.
I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. Go ahead and open up for our public hearing on item number 2. City Manager?
We'll have Director Semino address this item.
Good evening, Mayor Del Mar and members of the council. Again, tonight we're here to talk about the assessment districts for 2018-19, and I have Kev Charkutian here to give the presentation for the public hearing.
Good evening, Mayor, City Council. I have a very brief report to give. Like the director mentioned, this is a public hearing on the annual assessments in the city. At the last council meeting, City Council adopted a resolution of intention for these assessments. Tonight is a public hearing and a resolution confirming the assessments, so we can move forward. So the staff's recommendation is very brief tonight. It is recommended that the City Council open the public hearing, receive testimony, and adopt resolutions 18-28 and 18-29. 18-28 being the downtown districts, and 18-29 being the ad valorem districts for the lighting. Thank you.
Thank you. So we'll go ahead and open public hearing. Is that how we do this? And hear a comment. Do we have any comment from the public? Really? It's a public hearing, you sure? Positive? Okay, hearing none, I'll go ahead and close the public hearing and bring it back to council. What's your pleasure?
I'd like to make a motion that we approve resolution number 18-28 and resolution 18-29.
I'll second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Resolution is passed. Thank you. And thank you for your work. Appreciate it. Next, we have item number 3, consideration of resolution 1830, adopting the fiscal year 2018-19 budget. City Manager?
Thank you, Mayor. The Assistant City Manager and I will have a brief presentation, and during or after, we're happy to take questions.
Okay. I'm gonna go turn it over there.
All right, at our last council meeting, we had a presentation from Raf Tellis on the water rates, and I learned from that presentation to just put the big deal up front and not bury it. So This budget reduces budgeted spending by $800,000 from 17-18, and it's a $1.1 million reduction from 16-17. We currently project a surplus in the general fund of approximately $300,000. The recommendation from staff is to take 1/3 of that surplus to create a contingency fund in the general fund, and we'll talk about why we're recommending that momentarily. It also reduces allocations to the utility funds and shifts those allocations to the general fund. So when the Assistant City Manager gives her presentation, you'll see reduced expenditures in our utilities and an increase in those costs reflected in the general fund. This budget also reduces ongoing costs. So the next two slides I just pulled from last year to talk about the process, to remind council where we started at. And we told council last year this would be a 3-year process. The first year was transitional, second year was foundational, next year will be sustainable. What the plan was to reduce expenditures to offset known increases that were coming down the road, recognizing that ongoing costs must shrink while one-time costs likely have to increase. The example we used at the time was infrastructure and public safety equipment. And this year, same as last year, the goal was to reduce government costs without asking for a tax increase from the voters. Again, this year we did a zero-based budget. We started in January, so what you're seeing tonight is the end of 6 months of work where the executive team met multiple times per week and reviewed every line item in the budget and made every expense be justified and defended before we would allow it to go in the budget prior to going to council. Similar to last year, we prioritized public safety, public works, and parks and rec, and library is still part of our 3 Ps. All right, the results of that budget from last year, even though council won't get the final amended update until 2 weeks from now, or potentially the first meeting in July, spent $900,000 less than was budgeted the previous year. We increased our general fund reserves by almost $800,000. We eliminated 6 management positions. We tripled our infrastructure investment in water to more than $950,000. We began our transition to a career fire department, and we absorbed substantial CalPERS increases, which is the unfunded accrued liability for public employee pension. So the expectations for this budget, we've covered the first 2, but this is the year we're attempting to correct our imbalance between one-time spending versus ongoing spending, and correct what we see in out years as a structural imbalance where our expenditures would exceed our revenues. We also have septupled. We had to look up that word.
Is that a real word?
It really is. I had to Google. I could only go to quadruple. So we're 7 times higher on our water infrastructure than we were in the 2016-17 budget. This budget also eliminates an additional 3 full-time positions, 2 part-time positions, and a number of part-time hours. It reduces general fund allocations from water and sewer funds, continues to right-size operations, lays the foundation for our CalPERS stabilization plan, which council will see the second meeting in July, and it also provides funding for early retirement or voluntary separation for employees who choose to take advantage of that. As you saw in the staff report, we anticipate this will be the last year where we're able to balance the budget through managing vacancies or eliminating positions by transferring people or when they otherwise become vacant. We also plan 2 budget amendments. So what you see tonight, it will be amended. We intend to put a solar array at the spreading grounds. We'll have to amend the budget when we have the final cost on that. And as I just mentioned, the CalPERS stabilization plan will further amend this budget. Operational changes, police, we eliminated 1 full-time dispatcher position and 2 part-time cadet positions. Keeping in line with our philosophy of reinvesting funds where we need them, we did create a dedicated sworn evidence tech position. Fire, this is the big ticket item. This budget creates 6 full-time fire medic positions and 3 full-time engineer positions. We've hired 3 of these positions already. We interviewed for the 3 fire medic positions 2 weeks ago. I believe offers will be coming shortly. We have 1 full-time engineer, and we plan by the end of this budget year to have 2 additional full-time engineers. So this council's been able to move to a career fully paid fire department from volunteer without increasing spending or increasing taxes. Library, we eliminated the associate librarian position, and we reduced our hours for page tech positions from a maximum of 18 hours per week to 16 hours per week. We're reducing our open hours at the library from 47 hours to 43 hours. We're expanding hours on Thursday and Saturday. We intend to close on Friday. How we arrived at that decision is we looked at the use of the library by day and by hour and by program. And what we found is that Thursdays was a heavily utilized day, but it's one of the days that we were open the fewest hours, whereas Friday was underutilized. The majority of the people coming to the library were coming for one specific program that could easily be moved, and the rest of the day was the lowest per hour and per day use. In planning and community preservation, we eliminated a senior planner position. Future budget concerns, as last year, CalPERS and pension in our UAL. The UAL will continue to increase dramatically each year without intervention. Again, we'll bring our plan forward the second meeting in July. Water infrastructure, our system assessment shows a need for dramatic investment. We'll actually be talking about that later this evening. And non-pension personnel costs, salary and health benefits will continue to be priorities for our bargaining units, and increases will be difficult to implement without operational changes or offsets. So for all the fun stuff, we turn it over to the Assistant City Manager, who gets to do the numbers.
Good evening. As you saw in your packet here, we have some graphs to summarize everything, all the detail that you had in the proposed budget fiscal year 18-19. On the citywide revenues, we're looking at about 24 million in total revenues. And the main provider of those revenues, or source of those revenues, will be the general fund, our main operating fund. It's about 48%, close to 50% of the citywide revenues are coming in through the general fund. The second one would be our one of our major business or enterprise fund, water, which is 21% in revenues. The remainder is made up of sewer fund, 4%, internal service funds, which are charges to other user funds, 19%, and special revenue funds. It's all grant funding or metro funds that are specific for a particular purpose. When you look at citywide expenditures, you look at a similar pie chart. Here we're looking at 23 million in expenditures. And also the general fund comes in about 50% expenses. Water at 17%, sewer at 4% also. Internal service funds at 17%, and special revenue funds expenditures in the tune of 9% of the pie. And this small sliver here is successor agency. We still have expenditures, although the funding for successor agency, we received the last funding this fiscal year, 17-18, so we will not be obtaining future funding to pay off that debt for redevelopment agency or the successor agency. We have received the rest of the funds from the state through county property tax, and now we got expenditures moving into the next couple of years, and then successor agency will cease to exist. General fund sources. Our general fund, our number one revenue generator is property tax at 54%. With second, utility users tax at 21%. In other revenues, you have interest income. Also, you have donations, contributions, and other miscellaneous revenue sources. And we also have a transfer in. It's a small amount. This is mainly for public safety augmentation fund, so that's restricted for expenditures for police department. Here's a graph for our two major revenue sources. Property tax. The city has been very fortunate that we had significant increases over time of our property taxes. It's seen increases from year to year in the tune of about 6%. This year, we're seeing it level off, so we see an increase still, but it's dropped to about 5%. We're projecting a 5% increase in comparison to prior years. We were projecting 6% increase. On the utility users tax, we're looking over time. In 15-16, it took a drop. That was mainly the sunset of the 2% of the UUT. And it went back up in 16-17 once it was approved by our residents, our taxpayers. We see an erosion of the base coming up in fiscal year 18-19, so it's dropping a little from 2.5 to 2.4. That's our projection. When it comes to expenditures, as is typical, public safety takes the largest piece of the pie, with police department at 31% and fire department at 19%. The other large piece of the pie that you see here is admin services. This is mainly due to the allocations from internal service funds. General allocations are charged to admin services. So these are pretty much non-departmental expenditures that are here in admin services. To give you a summary of the numbers here for general fund, this is in the millions, in the thousands, I'm sorry. I wish it was in the millions, in the thousands. So we have, I'm showing fiscal year 16-17 actuals. And then 17-18, we're showing the revised budget. So any amendments to the budget made this year are reflected here. Then I have fiscal year 18-19 projected versus proposed. The reason for this here, I'm displaying here fiscal year 18-19 budget before collapsing of funds. If you recall, about 2 years ago, we collapsed some funds into the general fund. The main reason for that was that the general fund was had other operations in separate funds, which most of these funds were subsidized by the general fund. So by collapsing them into the general fund, we show a holistic picture of all the programs that are provided for by the general fund revenue sources. So we're doing an additional collapsing of funds. Here we're collapsing now the aquatics fund, the special events fund, and also the filming fund. A couple years ago, we had transfers out in the tune of over $1 million. Now with our transfers out are reduced to 16,000. That's mainly had to do with the transfers out for the subsidy to subsidize those funds that had other operations that really truly belong in the general fund. So when you're looking at our total projected or proposed budget for fiscal year 18-19, for revenues, we're projecting that revenues are going to come in $11.6 million, with transfers in of $138,000, and expenditures in the tune of $11.5 million. With the transfer out, this is to the water fund for the low-income discount. And we're also proposing a contingency fund of $100,000. This contingency for any expenditures that come up during the year, because our budget is pretty tight, as you can tell. In total, it's pretty. We don't have a lot of increases, so we're recommending a contingency to provide for additional expenditures that come up during the year. After having said that, we still have a net change in fund balance, or an increase in fund balance, projected surplus of $189,000. And I know you can't wait to spend this money here, but we are coming back to you at a later date with a rate stabilization fund for PERS, CalPERS, a stabilization fund. So this number will come into play at that point in time. This is just a graph of general fund sources versus uses over time from 2015 all the way to what we're projecting now for fiscal year 19. 2015, our revenues did exceed our expenditures or our uses. 2016, we saw expenditures overshadow revenues. 17, we saw surplus, so it means revenues exceed our expenditures again. And fiscal year 18, we're projecting at this point in time that we are going to have a balance pretty much. But in all true fairness, once we review our revenues and expenditures for this fiscal year, we believe we will have a additional surplus for fiscal year 18. Just because we see a lot of expenditures, for example, vacancies that haven't been filled, that we will see some expenditures that will not be expensed, so we'll have a surplus. We're projecting a surplus. We'll come up with better numbers once we complete the evaluation and the forecasting. So for fiscal year 19, we're projecting a surplus, which you saw in the prior slide, close to 200,000 surplus. Not to show our two enterprise funds or business type funds. We have the sewer fund, which is the smaller one of them. Here, when we budget, we actually budget for proprietary funds the same as business funds. So, well, I'll defer to that on water, sorry. 16-17, we had actual revenues of $869,000. This year, we're expecting those revenues to come in the tune of $875,000, and we're projecting for 18-19, $923,000. That includes the proposed rate increase that was presented to City Council at the last council meeting. On expenditures, 16-17, we saw expenditures of $1.3 million. 17-18, we're, according to our current budget, we're looking at $1.2 million. For 18-19, we are seeing a significant decrease in expenditures. We're projecting a decrease. This has to do with changing methodology for allocations. We created a shift from allocations to water and sewer business enterprise funds to the general fund. Also, there's been a lot of cost containment. We have a new director in utilities that is looking at things in a different way. So I have a lot of cost containment and reduction. So we are looking at this projection hopefully coming through at year end. We also had transfers in, and this transfers in coming from the sewer assessment plans. We have two in place. 16-17, we transfer 41,000, and we're projecting for 18-19, 38,000. 17-18, 21,000. This number in the future will level off and be more in the tune of 16,000. The reason for this additional transfers was there was accumulation in those funds, in those sewer assessments to be transferred to the sewer fund. But moving forward, you will only see about 16,000 in those assessments coming in. So in 16-17, you had a change in net position or of a negative, which was absorbed by the fund balance at this point in time. 17-18, we're also projecting that the expenditures are going to exceed the revenues, and the fund balance available will cover this deficit. But for fiscal year 18-19, we would not have any fund balance to carry or reserves to carry us forward. So we're looking at, that's why we had took a second look at expenditures to try to reduce those expenditures to come in within the revenues allotted there, and hopefully start rebuilding that reserve into the future. Now the larger water enterprise or business type fund is the water fund. And when I was referring to the accounting for business type funds, that applies to investment in capital assets. Because it's a business type fund, an investment in capital assets is not considered an expenditure, but rather an investment or a balance sheet item. So having said that, when you look at your budget, we're budgeting more for the P&L revenues and expenditures, not necessarily for balance sheet items. That's why when you look at your budget expenditures, you don't see this line item part of that. The only place where you see this investment in capital assets would be in your capital improvement plan. So for 16-17, we were looking at revenues of $5.3 million, and expenditures of 4.7 million, a change in net position to the good of over $500,000. What happens with this money, it goes into the reserves, so then in future periods, we have money to invest in capital assets. So whatever goes into reserves, we can then move forward next year and have more available for that purpose. For fiscal year 18-19, we're projecting or we're proposing on the revenue side, we're looking at $5 million. For a full year, we will be projecting $5.2 million, but because this number includes the proposed rate increases that were presented to council at the prior council meeting. If those rates were to be approved, we would only project, we would be losing out on 2 months or one billing out of the year because of at the time of the implementation. So moving forward, if we were looking at a full year, that proposed rate would bring in the tune of $5.2 million instead of the $5 million. On the expenditure side, we also took a second look. The impact here is that the change in methodology on the allocations that had a shift to the general fund. Also, reductions in expenditures overall to really improve the operations and be more cost efficient. So we're looking at budgeting expenditures in the tune of $4 million with a change in net position of $1 million. For the investment in capital assets, we will be using this $1 million, plus also we have cash available that was released from the debt refinancing that will be used to provide for this investment here. And here's also a graph on the water fund operating revenues versus expenditures. Fiscal year 15, they were about even. Revenues and expenditures, it was pretty much break even. Fiscal year 16, revenues exceeded the expenditures, which is good. That means we build up our reserves to invest in future infrastructure. Fiscal year 17, we saw another increase in revenues, also expenditures, but the revenues still exceeded the expenditures. Fiscal year 18, we're projecting that expenditures might be a little higher than revenues. And fiscal year 19, we're projecting that we'll have significantly higher revenues than expenditures, and that will allow us to build up our reserves to, again, invest in our future infrastructure. The action items before you tonight are adopting the Resolution 1830, adopting the fiscal year 18-19 budget. Resolution 1831, which is approving the GAN limit. This is an appropriations limit or spending limit for the budget for fiscal year 18-19. Resolution 1832, approving the fiscal year 18-19 fee schedule. And Resolution 72, which is the Public Financing Authority, adopting the fiscal year 18-19 budget. It's a similar resolution to the 1830, but it is for the Public Financing Authority. That concludes my presentation. I'm happy to answer any questions you may have.
I know that we have all spoken individually with the city manager regarding the budget, but are there any other questions you'd like to bring out right now?
I have a couple. Thank you, Assistant City Manager and City Manager. It's very comprehensive, and it almost looks too pretty to believe for this year. I know for next year we are anticipating some challenges. 2 questions. First question is with respect to the $100,000 for contingency in the general fund. How are you looking at that? How is that going to be prioritized? Is it based on urgency? Is there some kind of criteria that you're following?
Yes, Councilmember Harris-Mende. The second year going through the zero-based budget, we again compared actuals to budgeted, and we cut every expenditure down as far as we could. The contingency fund is designed if we exceed a budgeted amount or if something comes up during the year that was unbudgeted and unforeseen, we can then access the contingency fund to pay for that while also sending a quarterly report to council. So directors won't be able to access a contingency fund without answering, is it a one-time expense or an ongoing expense? Why wasn't it budgeted? And what happens if we don't expend the money this year and wait till future years or not at all.
Okay. Thank you. And the next question I have is in regards to the water fund and the investment of capital assets. And I think, Assistant City Manager, you'd stated that the change in net position of the plus 1 million or 1 million in net position with the I don't know if it's savings, but the dollar amount from the debt, that it equals to the 2.94 million. Does that, and we're not touching our reserves for water at that point, it'll still be at a 5 million?
The reserves for water at 5 million.
So our water reserves are at 5 million, correct? The investment in capital assets is at 2 million. And you said that includes the change in net position of the 1 million plus that money that we were able to draw down from the debt.
No, also it would carryovers from this fiscal year on items that were already budgeted to be rebudgeted for this particular purpose, and also dip into fund balance also, correct.
Okay, and then so we're not touching.
So it's a combination of a lot of the things. Whatever we have in reserves, the cash flow from the savings, and so it's really the cash is coming from the release of those savings. That's cash, but there's also budget carryovers, and it's going to impact the fund balance too. So it's a combination.
Okay, but our water reserves will remain at the 5 million. It's not touching that.
It is touching
it
the
is.
reserves too. Yes.
I see.
Just a correction. We'll get the exact number to council. I don't believe the water reserves are at 5 million though.
No.
I believe they're at
That's
40% of expenditures right now, but we'll get the exact number to council afterwards.
Thanks.
Any other questions?
I have a question actually on the investment in capital assets, and we talked about this a bit before the meeting. I'm still, a little unclear how we're accounting for it, because now the investment in capital assets are showing up on the balance sheet, and they're not actually being budgeted for. But it's just confusing to me because we're still budgeting to spend $2 million on capital projects for the water fund. I mean, we're planning on spending that money, and it's hard for me to look at the budget and not find that anywhere, right? And then just say at the end of the year, we're going to have a balance sheet that shows that we spent it. So, I mean, what is the accounting principle that allows us to do that?
I'll try not to get too detailed on the accounting, but I'll try. For business funds, we don't account on cash basis. It's a accrual basis. So what happens when you invest in a capital asset, it's a balance sheet item. It's not an expenditure. The way we expense that asset over time is through depreciation. So that allows, so when we budget for, it's budgeted on the capital improvement plan, so you can see what the investment that we're recommending. But on the fund financials, it's not gonna be an expenditure, so you don't see it there. It'll be in the balance sheet. So you're looking at the capital improvement plan to see what the investment is. It's going to end up in the balance sheet. It's going to be depreciated over time through depreciation. So then it allows the city to set up, per se, a sinking fund, that the depreciation is a non-cash expenditure. So to accumulate the money to then replace that asset in the future.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, I actually somewhat understand that.
Okay.
But the problem is that
I'm trying not to.
But I'll just take it one step at a time. So we're relying on the capital improvement plan then.
Correct.
Can I find that anywhere in the budget?
Yeah, it's in the
Okay.
in the last pages of the proposed budget. You see the CIP plan.
Let me see that. So, because if there's something I can point to, when you say the last couple pages.
Capital projects.
Detail of the cap.
Yes.
That page.
There, you will see for water, you see 2 million, a little over 2 million there.
Yep. I mean, yeah. I mean, so I get the accounting, and I get why we're doing that, because depreciation and amortization are different principles than expenditures. But it almost seems like we're doing ourselves a disservice by staying so true. And I get why we're doing that, but it's hard because we're actually spending $2 million over the next year, or maybe we're not. I don't know how you want to, I don't know what the nomenclature or how you want to phrase it, but we're putting $2 million into our water system for capital improvements or replacing depreciated capital projects. And we don't really get to say, like, look at our budget, we're doing a good job. Because that's what for the average person that picks this up, they'll be like, oh, you're not, they're going to point to the zeroed out capital outlay line or the $68,000 repair and maintenance line in the water fund.
We can change the presentation.
Yeah.
We definitely can do that. The main reason why we do it this way, we prepare budget on the same basis that we prepare our financial statements.
Mhm.
That way, when you look at our financial statements and you do a comparison budget to actual, it's comparable. And places where they use a different budget basis, then it's very hard to compare apples to oranges. So that's why we use the same basis of accounting. On the presentation, I could totally understand what you're talking about. We can definitely show on the water fund capital investment in capital assets in the budget there itself, just not show it as an expenditure.
Right. Well, yeah, because
we
I
can
think that
definitely do
relates, and that'll relate to our water rate study, because
Yes.
I think it's important to note that we are spending $2.1 million in 18-19.
We can definitely present it in the
So-
same way we did on that, on the PowerPoint.
But no,
Not a problem.
that's helpful, your explanation, and thank you for that. So that's all I have.
One quick question. I'd like if you could, maybe talk a little bit about how zero-based budgeting actually works when the management team is getting together and finding all these ways to save astounding amounts of money in the last year and a half. It's almost as if someone's waving a magic wand. What is it?
Not
What
a
are the
magic
actual?
wand, he brings up the bat and the club.
One wand in one
I don't know what
hand
the
and a hammer in
dynamics
the
are.
other.
What we
We're trustee manager.
what we do as an executive team when we start meeting in January is decide what our core services are, and then what type of budget we need to create to meet those services this year and in future years. So essentially, the saying you hear from me all the time is, if we were going to build a water department this year, what would it look like? We don't care about what was budgeted last year. We only care about what actually happened. And then we take every line item in the budget, even if it's a $24 expenditure, and we say, well, last year we only spent 12, we budgeted 20, we should only budget 12 this year. We go through every line item, ensuring that we keep our core principles intact, reduce ongoing expenditures, invest in areas that have been underinvested in an attempt to get the operations right size so we don't have the structural deficit in out years.
What I meant by dynamics, are you talking about just with individual directors, or are you sitting in a room with multiple directors?
Yeah, all the directors and managers meet.
How's that work? So you have directors critiquing each other's budgets? Is that how this is kept honest, or?
We do. It's a lot of fun. But the idea is that as a team, our job as an executive team is to implement the policy and vision of council. Our second job is whatever it says on our business card. So we absolutely have the utilities director making the police chief defend his expenditures in dispatch. And that's one example. It's been 6 months of just a rollicking good time.
That answers my question.
I do have one question. The elimination of the senior planner, what is the impact going to be on the planning community preservation with the elimination of that position?
Well, one of the things we looked at last year was how we established hierarchies in the city, and we had a lot what we called were flat hierarchies. So in this case, we had a director who had one report, who was a planning manager, who had one report, who was the planner, and it's a very inefficient way to operate a planning department. So what we did is we, when that position became vacant, we didn't fill it, we eliminated it, and we created a planning position which is able to handle, under the direction of Director Gonzalez, a whole array of activities that he oversees. It's a cheaper way to operate, but more importantly, it's more efficient and effective.
Yeah. Okay.
Any other questions? If not, we'll go ahead and open this up for public comment. Nobody wants to comment on the budget? Oh, here we come. Here comes one.
Good evening, Mayor, members of the council. Sorry for my abrupt standing up. I was a little stiff there in the chair. Thank you for the opportunity to address you. My name is Shannon King. I'm a member of the Library Board of Trustees. I'm trying to wrap my head around the budget, and I don't envy your entire group. This is a lot to digest, and I know there's so many groups that you're trying to balance and support, and thank you for doing that. For the library, as an advocate, just to say my piece, I do feel like it's taken quite a hit at a time when we're going to be going back to the community and either asking for fundraising or a tax or how to support it going forward. And I know we'll have the opportunity to talk with you further here in a couple weeks, which is outstanding. Thank you. But I would just hope we would look at messaging as what that means if we're closing on a Friday or reducing staff. We have such wonderful people in the library and that work there, and they work so hard, and of course we want to keep them sane and energized and able to support all these programs. So just wanted to put that out there. Thank you for considering it, and we look forward to talking to you about this more going forward.
Thank you. Anybody else? Public comment? If not, I'll bring it back to council. And City Manager, can you address that issue of the reduction in staff in the library?
Yes, Mayor, I can. On the year-to-year budget basis, the reduction from the current budget year that we're in to the proposed budget looks a little more dramatic than it is. And there's a couple of reasons for that, but the main driver is we had two departments brought together, community services and library. When the director for those two departments left, we didn't fill the position. It was a fully burdened budgeted cost of about $175,000, and the majority of that resided in the library. Also, when Mr. Baker was here under his leadership, we had intended to take two part-time positions to full-time positions to start some new programs that he had been working on. We budgeted for that, but when he left, that never actually occurred. So the impact from last year to this year to the proposed budget will ultimately be two full-time FTEs, two part-time FTEs, and a reduction in hours from our pages and text from 18 hours maximum a week to 16 hours maximum a week, though all those hours are not always used. In that context, the library budget is smaller this year, or not in the proposed budget, than it was this year, and is smaller than it was 2 years ago. And when we talk about the services and the direction that council asked us to provide, one of the first things we were asked is to move to a career department, move away from a volunteer department. And that means when we fund 9 new positions in the general fund that are fire, we have to make reductions in the general fund and other departments to ensure we can do that. The library participated the same way as planning and police and every other general fund department.
So based on what you just said, it would make sense that the people in the library budget thought that this was a doable plan.
They're cautiously optimistic.
Thank you. Okay, any comments from anybody?
Yeah, I have a few comments. First of all, I just, the challenge of creating a paid fire department was a huge one, and I'll tell you, 2 years ago, I did not think that was going to be possible with holding our tax base the way it is. So I just think that's phenomenal that you've been able to do that, but I realize that, as we're just talking about the library, there's a price to pay with that. But I also want to just commend you on the presentation of this, because it's pretty gutsy to to show these surpluses before you're actually presenting the pension UAL plan. And that wasn't really mentioned a lot in this, but our unfunded liability increasing, I don't know if significantly or dramatically is a better word to use. So I just want to caution people that look at this budget, because when you do see these things, these surpluses, it's necessary for what's coming. So I'm looking forward to see how we're going to use some of that money to stabilize the pension obligation going forward. The other thing too is the couple of things of rolling those special funds into the general fund what that does to people looking at this, and we've heard these complaints before, oh, well, the general fund is growing. That's an accounting mechanism that was used by the city here that actually simplifies the budget, but it does make it look like the general fund is growing in an artificial way, and it really isn't. And the same goes for the other adjustments that you've made with reducing the amount spent on the internal services fund and the allocations that allowed us to give some money back to our utility departments, but the expense now is incurred in the general fund. So it makes it look like our general fund we're growing, even though the city manager and our finance director is telling us that we've been cutting. So that makes perfect sense to me, only because with all these conversations we've had and asking questions about it. So I just want to caution anybody that's looking at this, do a deep dive before you think that the expenses are increasing, because they're really not. I mean, we've been just cutting and cutting and cutting, and we'll have to see how long we can keep going at this, because I just don't know where we're going to be able to cut too much more going forward. And the same goes for the water fund. When we show in that graph that we've got a big gap between the expenses and the revenue, that is going to be allowing us, to use your words, to reinvest in the water system. So it is really not a surplus as it appears. And I think our finance director made a pretty good explanation of that, but that really just allows us to reinvest. So I'm very impressed with what you've been able to do here, and I'll just see what happens going forward, but looking forward to the plan to stabilize the pension obligations.
And Councilmember Capocha, if I could just make a couple comments on that. The number one question we've got from the public is, if you have a surplus, why are you making reductions? The answer to that is, first and foremost, the pension obligation UAL, which increased by $150,000 last year, $150,000 this year, and will continue to rise until we can contain that cost. We will bring that plan forward. Also, out of that $300,000, a significant portion of it is one-time revenues that can't be replicated in future years. So if we use one-time revenues to pay for ongoing costs, then next year we'll be in the same position that we were in last year. Secondly, when we talk about how we account for things on the general fund and the increases, you're talking about the change in allocation from water and sewer. It increased our expenditures in the general fund by about $300,000. Collapsing the special funds was another $250,000. So we always encourage people to keep going past the subtotals until you get to the very bottom at the end of the budget, where the total is $800,000 in reduced spending from the current year that we're in.
Just one more comment too, is that the utility tax is what, 21% of our general fund now?
Correct.
John, when we were elected, wasn't it about 34% of the general fund at that time?
Much higher. I don't know what the exact number is.
Significantly higher. So, I mean, I just want to make that point, that we're relying less and less on that utility tax, even though it's been stable at 10%, except for the 1 year where it's sunset.
That's right.
Well, the property tax has been going up a little faster than we thought it was going.
Very fortunate that it has. We'd be in big trouble if it didn't. Yeah.
I don't have much to add. I mean, I think I agree with all those really good comments, and well done. The budget to me every year is always a well, let's see how it plays out. I mean, it's a snapshot in time. Hopefully, it does, as you say, it's a process, and hopefully, it does play out as you've planned. And but this obviously took a ton of work, months of work, as you pointed out. So I'd like to thank all the directors, obviously our assistant city manager, and our city manager. So, thank you.
I think it was summarized very well. I don't think I need to reiterate any of that, but the thanks, I'll reiterate that piece. I know this is a lot of hard work. And just changing the way that we think about our budgeting. I know when zero-based budget was first introduced to the staff, it was a little bit hard to swallow, but moving forward, I think it makes it easier. And also, too, the way that we're changing the way things are reporting and allocated, it's really difficult right now to compare years past, but as we are moving forward, we'll have a better grasp on being able to make those comparisons from year to year. But again, the big elephant in the room will be about how we adjust UAL, and looking forward to see how we address that. So the savings are really not savings. They are going to be invested in other areas we're anticipating increased costs. So thank you.
Yeah, I don't have much to add except that one of the goals, I think, for the city council was that we had a stabilized, sustainable budget. That was always a goal. And while this may not be perfect, it's certainly leading us in that direction and allowing us to invest in our future. We're no longer just thinking of the 1 or 2 years that we're here, but for the next 20 or 25 years, which we really need to start doing if we want to protect our city. I was impressed that we were able to provide a budget, retain all of our services, didn't raise the taxes, so.
No layoffs?
No layoffs, so we didn't have to lose any personnel. So to me, I think that's something that you and your staff need to be commended for. And that's all I have to say.
Mayor, can I make a quick comment?
Sure.
Just everything well said. I agree with everything I just heard. I want to know how we get zero-based budgeting in Sacramento and Washington. Just throwing it out there.
I agree.
I know it's a hard process to go through, because you have all your directors there, and of course their department's the very most important, but, they have to actually acknowledge, right?
Are you ready to run for governor?
Yeah, I was gonna say, you gotta get in that governor's office.
I'll campaign for you.
Okay. Are we ready to move on this?
Do we have to formally adopt the budget, or is this just
Yeah, yes, Mayor Pro Tem Harabedian, there's, I believe, 4 items we're asking you to approve tonight.
Okay.
I'll make the motion. I move that we approve Resolution 1830, 1831, 1832, and Resolution 72.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Resolutions 1, 2, 3, and 4 pass. Thank you very much. Does anybody need a break before we go into the last?
Probably should take 5.
Okay. We'll go ahead and take a 5-minute break, okay?
Too bad you're missing out on Rome, though.
I know.
Yeah.
We're gonna do it next year, we hope.
Maybe not. Going to Italy? You going to Italy?
Rome next year.
Oh, okay, nice.
We had a plane last year, but Maxwell's broken legs.
We'll note that our next item, the consideration of rescinding city council determination, is our council member Arizmendi has to recuse herself from that, just like she did from our closed session today. So she is, I don't know where she is. She's in timeout, I guess.
Yeah.
I don't know. Okay, city manager, item number 4.
Thank you, Mayor. This item is, the action before City Council is to consider rescinding City Council determination denying Hillside Development Permit 12-01 and Conditional Use Permit 12-08 and reinstating Planning Commission Resolution 1304 as granted on October 16th, 2014, allowing for the construction of a 2-story, 3,125 square foot single-family home residence at 610 Baldwin. Staff is available for questions.
Okay. Do we have any questions?
Not for me.
And this is for, as we alluded to at the beginning of the meeting, due to the settlement agreement?
That is correct, Mayor. As the council is probably very aware, more than a couple $100,000 have been spent in this litigation already by the city. And it was anticipated that the city would easily spend a couple $100,000 more before we had completed trial. Given the discovery schedule, the need to hire expert witnesses, and then going to trial. So just additional information for you that isn't actually in the staff report, since I believe the recommendation from staff is has a lot to do with expenses, and you just approved a budget drastically reducing expenses as in the past.
Okay, thank you. I have a couple questions because we have received emails from our residents, and one of them is, does this particular house, when we rescind this house, will it set precedent for any other houses being built on 1 Carter?
It will not. This house was the result of a lot of workover by the Planning Commission back in 2014 after the matter was remanded to them to apply specific design guidelines. And they pushed on the developer to until a mutually acceptable reduction in design was created. It's every design up there. These are supposed to be custom homes. So each home will be unique to the lot, the topography, where it sits in relation to the natural environment, including the mountain. This will not set a precedent, which is one of the advantages of not going forward with to trial, because neither side knows what would happen.
Okay, thank you. And the general plan guidelines that will be for all the future homes will be under which general plan? The general plan at the time of this particular home or going forward?
Good question. It's under the applicable current general plan.
So the one that we adopted a few years ago?
That is correct.
Okay, thank you. No questions from council? I know we're going to take some public comment, but would you please, Assistant City Clerk, let us know. We did get some emails from the public, and if we could just put those in the record, you can put them in a record and just announce who they were and who sent them.
Thank you, Mayor Delmar. We did the city did receive 5 emails from local residents. We received 1 email from Ms. Terrell Willis bringing to your attention letters that were sent to the Planning Commission and City Council in October and November 2014, respectively. Both letters are printed and provided to you at the dais and will be entered into public record. We've received also an email from Mr. George and Mrs. Sarah Harmon, and they are asking the council to not rescind your denial and support and to essentially take no action. A 3rd email was received from Caroline Brown asking the City Council to observe the Hillside Management Zone, the HMZ, A fourth email was received today also from Deb Sheridan, and a fifth email from Simi Salambier asking the City Council to uphold denial of the HDP and CUP, the Hillside Development Permit and Conditional Use Permit.
Thank you. Do we have any other public comment on this item?
Madam Mayor and members of the City Council, you will not be surprised to hear that I earnestly hope you will reject this proposed house. Quite simply, it fails the eyeball test, as the City Council rightly determined in its previous ruling. That this eyeball test is legitimate is presupposed even by this proposal, which strictly limits the paint color for the house. The Hillside Ordinance in its relevant drawings implicitly uses it, and not just bare objective numbers, to demonstrate required conformity of proposed dwellings to the contour of the environment. That the previous owners used an unwise grading plan, making such conformity more difficult, at least for houses of the desired size, really is not our fault and shouldn't figure in the decision. I would suggest that this is not a decision for one house alone in the larger scheme of things. I believe that it is delusional to suppose that this decision will not set a binding precedent for all future construction in this development. And if you want to see what this location will look like 15 years from now, I refer you to the Lavinia development in Altadena. Sterile, unimaginative, depressing, wholly unfitted to its setting. Its earth tone paint doesn't fix it. I'm glad for your noticing how the proposed house and landscaping encroaches on one of the very few fine old oaks remaining on the property. But that you needed to note that a new tree can't quite be planted right under the current one is all the evidence one could want, that no attention has been paid whatsoever to the environment, doing which is required by the Hillside Ordinance. Furthermore, mitigation hardly suffices when its fruition could not at best be enjoyed by anyone now living on the planet. We mutilate the old and the priceless for what we count immediate gain and salve our consciences with mitigation. Perhaps you've heard the fable of the hungry crow. He was tempted with a good meal in exchange for a single feather. He hesitated, being rather attached to his feathers, and initially refused, even as you did, with respect to this plan. But he got hungrier, and when the tempter came back, he agreed, and felt much relieved after the fact to discover that he could still fly just fine. Well, you know how it went. He got hungry again and again, and it was easier and easier to give up feathers. One day, not so very far off, he could no longer fly at all, no longer be what a crow is supposed to be. Yes, there are genuine risks and uncertainties in resisting, but the losses produced by not resisting are clear and certain. There has been something unique about Sierra Madre that we have loved and have wanted to protect, but anyone who has been paying attention knows that that uniqueness is under relentless pressure and is visibly fading away, green fence by green fence. Please vote no on this one.
Thank you. Do we have any other public comment?
One great thing about coming to these endless meetings is the opportunity to hear Marguerite Schuster.
I totally agree. Very, very nice. Thank you.
Terrell Willis Carter Avenue. And I couldn't agree more, this idea about not setting a precedent. Surely there will not be a house proposed that is 1 inch less than 3,125 square feet in 3 levels of living space. Surely. It will set a precedent. I'm actually I actually was going to read to you the letter that Matt Bryant had sent this afternoon because he's ill and couldn't make it tonight. And I may be able to do that. In order to make an informed decision, the City Council needs to have all the information required to make the correct decision. We've come to understand that when the initial map for the entire project was approved by Resolution 05-58, there were certain conditions that had to be met. In fact, there were about 36 pages of conditions. Several of the conditions dealt with the requirements that an HOA be formed and that there be a certain amount of open space, and that open space common area was required to be maintained by the HOA. Conditions those numbers have changed. It's 20, 21, delete 30, I think 22, 105, 196, and 200 dealt with these issues and were among the many specific conditions for the approval of the project. However, we understand that one of the larger parcels included in that open space common area was sold at a tax sale and is currently being offered for sale. The question becomes, who is going to maintain that open space, clear the brush, etc., when that parcel was an integral part of the approval process and yet is now owned by a third party. In light of this information, it seems to us that it would be premature to approve the first house, which is situated in a development in which the basis for the approval of the entire development has now undergone a material change. I would just like to say for myself, because of all of the great work that's been done on the general plan and the hillside management zone ordinance and the design guidelines, the rules are in place to prevent a McMansion suburb. Please implement them.
Come on down.
James Annis, North Mountain Trail. I just want to read from the email from Greg and Sarah Jane Harmon that they had sent out earlier. Dear council members, we are writing to encourage you to stand firm and not rescind your denial of the plans for 610 Baldwin Court by supporting a take no action vote. The City Council originally unanimously decided that the developer's design for this lot failed on 2 out of the 5 requirements for approval in the Hillside Management Zone Ordinance. The ordinance has not changed, nor should your decision. This developer has not been easy to work with. The city needs safeguards in place to ensure the developer does not continue in this manner. A couple of notes. He has said that there was should be noted that the developer wasted many man-hours of the city's time by making only the smallest incremental changes prior to each planning commission meeting, stretching out the approval process to 12 meetings. Developer cut trees on the lot without approval and not in keeping with the arborist report. He goes on to say, if you cannot agree to take no action, we would strongly encourage you to make sure that all paperwork is accurate and complete prior to making any determinations and therefore agreeing on continuation. There was a couple points he went on about. Before any building can be approved on this site, the arborist report needs to be redone. The original reports for development were riddled with inaccuracies and are unequivocally out of date. Skipping down. It is not stated what steps of the approval process fall under the 18 months extension. This needs to be spelled out clearly. This meeting seems to be very rushed. The notice to neighbors was received less than a week and a half prior to the meeting. We know many of our many Sierra Madrians who are unaware of the meeting was taking place. Please do not allow yourselves to be rushed into making a decision before taking time to do a thorough evaluation. Sincerely, Greg and Sarah Jane Harmon. Also, I'd just like to say in my own notes or my own thoughts that I've been here for 20 years in Sierra Madre, and I'm still considered one of the newcomers, I guess you could say. I've moved 4 times within Sierra Madre, all within probably 6 blocks. We've done that because we love this town. We love the people here. We love the feel of this town. We choose not to live in a place where McMansions happen on a weekly basis, such as down the street in Arcadia. We don't want to see that here. I feel very strongly that the proposal of the house does not fit in with the hillside It's a very beautiful hillside. I get to spend a lot of time up there, and I don't want to see the essence of the hills change in Sierra Madre. So thank you, and I urge you to take no action.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Do we have anybody else for public comment? Seeing none, we'll go ahead and we'll bring it back to council. Any comments?
I can go. You know, there's plenty of votes that I've had to take up here that, you know, personally I didn't love, but you do for, in the grand scheme of things, the benefit of the city and your fiduciary as a council member. And this litigation happened over 40 square feet, give or take. And we were sued over a very small issue in the grand scheme of development, in the grand scheme of city operations. In my view, is it's time to move on, and it's time to put this litigation to rest. And because of that, I'll vote to do that. So.
Yeah, I agree with Councilmember Harabedian. I don't see this as a loss to Sierra Madre. As Councilmember Harabedian says, we're haggling. We were sued, and we spent upwards of over $200,000 haggling over 40 square feet. We didn't initiate the lawsuit. We were sued. You know, this could have all been, the house could have been built by now, but we did the best we could. I don't think any of us loved this project, but, you know, we did the best we could to negotiate the best possible deal. And if we would have gotten what we would have wanted, there would be a house standing there right now that'd be 40 square feet less. But it was going to get built one way or the other. So again, our responsibility in the grand scheme of things is to ensure that we've got a community that is safe, and we provide services that our residents expect. And I just don't think continued litigation and exposing ourselves to ongoing risk is worth it for us. And our responsibility would be to just let's come to an agreement on this. And I hope that we've learned some things on the council side. I hope that the developer has learned some things. Our planning commission is certainly a little wiser over this. And I sincerely hope that we get the projects that are described by our residents that fit into the hillsides and follow the letter of our law and the spirit of the design guidelines. So I'm going to continue to fight to make sure that we get that. I believe our planning commission is going to do that, but it is time to move on this project and get back to where we were a couple of years ago when it was first brought before us.
Councilmember Goss?
Boy, this is a tough one, and we have tough decisions to make on city council because 2 years went fast. I remember the meeting when we had to, when the subcommittee was formed, and the subcommittee, I was on that subcommittee in earnest, tried to come up with a proposal that we thought would work. So this whole thing has been very frustrating, disappointing, but we are, after all, in charge of the best interests of the entire city, common good, and that includes many different things. And as I think if you're paying attention to our budget discussion tonight, we just don't have $200,000 to kind of gamble with, because that's what you're doing. And as far as I'm concerned, you know, if you had unlimited funds and unlimited time and staff, sure. We just don't have deep pockets here at Sierra Madre, so we have to pick our fights, I think, very carefully. So I regrettably agree. I think my two colleagues here have spoken well to this issue, and I agree with everything they've said, and I'm going to vote to support it as well.
You know, this was a very difficult decision that we made to go with the settlement agreement. On the other hand, it wasn't a very hard decision to make, because knowing that we would probably end up in trial a very expensive trial and not knowing. And the risk for me was more than just the financial, but it was also the risk that we would lose control of all the other homes that will be built on the one Carter. Had we not been victorious in that trial, we would have had the judge decide or a jury decide what houses would go up there. So now we have our general plan that we adopted. We still have our hillside management zone. We still have a wonderful planning commission who I think has been educated, and I have all the confidence in the world that they will make sure that the other houses that come forward are going to be what Sierra Madre wants. And as Councilmember Capocia said, it came down to 46 feet, and 46 square feet to me is not worth the risk of what we could lose if we went forward with this trial. So I too would agree to rescind our decision, our earlier decision, and agree with the settlement agreement. Do you need a full motion? Yes.
So with that, I'll move to rescind City Council determination denying HDP 12-01 and CUP 12-08, reinstating Planning Commission Resolution 13-04, and approving the application for a new two-story single-family residence located at 610 Baldwin Court.
I'll second that.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Thank you. On to consideration of adoption and comprehensive water and wastewater cost of service study.
Thank you, Mayor. We have a brief presentation, which
we also have Councilmember Arizmendi approaching.
Yes. We have a brief presentation, which I'll be giving, and then afterwards or during will be available for questions.
Okay. Welcome back. Thank you. Sorry we had to put you in timeout.
It was warmer out there anyway.
This is a brief presentation.
I'll go very fast. Thank you, Mayor. In the staff report tonight, one thing we want to note is we're asking council to adopt a draft rate study with tables that will change based on the action that you take tonight. So we were tasked with coming back with changes to the infrastructure fixed charge, and depending on if or what council adopts tonight, that is what will ultimately go into the rate study we're asking you to draft. Same thing with the sewer rates. So with that, at the conclusion of the last council meeting, Director Reynoso and I sat down and reflected on the conversation and wanted to try and tie council's direction from the last meeting to the need in the system with the water system master plan that we completed in 2017. So this presentation and discussion is really going to try and marry those two documents. And right in the first paragraph of the water system master plan was a majority of the pipelines in the city are 70 years beyond their useful life. So not 70 years, installed 70 years ago, but 70 years beyond their useful life. So you can't read these numbers, and you don't need to. This is just to remind you that what the water system master plan did was take all of our pipes by diameter and type, and they put them on a map. They color-coded that map with 3 colors, red, orange, and green, and what that represented, red was 9% of the system. It represented pipes that are in the ground and have failed. The orange represented an additional 19% of the system of pipes that are failing and likely to fail. The green, though you would think that represented good, that actually just represents not as bad as red or orange, and actually about 50% of those pipes also need to be replaced. So what Director Reynoso and I did to show council is we took the entire pipe length in our system, and we're trying to show the types of pipes that need to be replaced and in what priority order. So right now, as we speak, 9% of the pipes we're calling urgent replacement. Those have failed and are in the ground. Priority 1 pipes, again, the 19% are pipes that are failing or have failed since the water system master plan was complete. The remaining 72% of the system, 50% of that has to be replaced, which is 36 of the 72%. What we tried to do from there is establish an infrastructure fixed charge that will fully fund capital projects and deferred maintenance, while also establishing and maintaining adequate reserves. What we showed council last time was an infrastructure fixed charge for $700,000 annually, which would be $5.2 million raised for infrastructure over the term of the study. What council will tasked us with coming back is what we call the bandwidth proposal. It's what is the maximum amount staff could turn out in a year, given everything else we're working on. The revenue adjustment you'll see is 10% higher than the proposal, but between design, bid, build, implementation, about $1.2 million is the maximum that staff can put out in a year. So when we put that with the water system master plan, you're seeing the current proposal and what proposal 3 highlighted in orange. Under the current plan, it would take half a century to replace the pipes that are necessary to replace. Under proposal 3, 3 decades. Under these proposals, the urgent, the 9% of the system could be replaced in under 5 years with the bandwidth plan. And the years to replace both priority 1 and urgent would be 14.2 years under proposal 3, as opposed to 25 years under what was proposed at the last meeting. So what we want to get to is the different costs with the different structures, and we'll skip by this because we go in more in depth in other slides, but essentially the one to your furthest left is what was proposed as a bi-monthly charge per resident for the infrastructure fixed cost, and the gold is what the bandwidth proposal would be, again by meter size. So what we want to talk about when we look at this is 91% of all our residents use 1-inch meters or below, and of that 75% use 3/4 or less. So though there are impacts to the other 9% of the customers, when council is considering what the ultimate charge should be based on need, it's most important to focus on 3/4 inch and below, and then in the second tier of 1 inch. So for that, if you're 91% impacted accounts, what you would see is a bi-monthly charge of $21.75 or $10.50 a month for 3/4 inch or less under the last proposal, and under the current proposal, $19 per month or $38 bi-monthly. We put an asterisk on the 1 inch as you see that it's $63.58 or $30 a month. We're actually reducing the fixed charge by $10 per month, so the total increase is reduced by $10 bi-monthly. So the final slide to show the varying proposals that we have, the current and the 5 increased proposals, and highlighting the bandwidth proposal shows the bi-monthly charge and the monthly charge for what is 75% of all residents, the revenue that it would raise, and how long it would take to replace the pipes that have failed in the ground if we were to proceed.
Still 5 years. Thank you. Questions?
I have a couple. Go ahead.
Yeah, just on the bandwidth. Again, what goes into, how did you figure, I mean, what you're proposing here is proposal number 3, saying that that's the maximum bandwidth. What does that exactly mean?
So looking at all the responsibilities our staff has, it's what we estimate we can actually design and bid and have built in a year, also taking into account that if we go much over that, we would have the entire town torn up at the same time for a good period of the year.
Mm-hmm.
We call it the bandwidth. To go beyond that, we would likely need to bring in some type of capital manager or capital staff to design and bid the projects for us.
So less efficiency in that case, because we're having to spend more money just to move faster than we don't get as much pipe in the ground for every dollar we're spending.
Yes, that's correct.
Okay.
Can I just ask a follow-up to that? Given that we're going to use existing staff to get to this bandwidth, what are we losing on? I mean, we're not adding additional staff, so is there a cost of loss if we are going to expand to this 10%, well, to get to this bandwidth?
I wouldn't describe it as a loss, but we would prioritize our Public Works Director for portions of the year to only work on design and bid for water main replacements, and maybe not work on some other less important projects. I don't think it's practical to assume that he'd be doing everything he's doing today, even under the bandwidth, but we have other staff that can assist with things like CDBG applications and items like that.
So you're not anticipating that we would need more in terms of labor?
No, I believe under current staffing today, we could go with the bandwidth proposal, as we're calling it.
My only question is, we're establishing the new infrastructure fixed charge, and it's broken out from the other historical fixed charges that we've charged. And is there a reason why you wouldn't combine the two into just one large fixed charge like we do historically? I guess, why were we doing that historically, and why are we doing this now?
So Mayor Pro Tem, at the very beginning when we started meeting with the Water Subcommittee, one of the things they tasked us with was showing residents the actual cost of the infrastructure we put in the ground, and not, currently it's called a beater charge, and we thought that wasn't descriptive enough. So we wanted to show exactly where the money was being spent on.
Yeah, no, I think it's much better, and I'm just wondering why we never did that in the past. And, I think that the way that you've revised the numbers, I really like, but that was just something that I had a question. And then on the notice to the residents about the water rate and the sewer rate study generally, my question is, do we think that we have made it clear enough to them that, and maybe it's just adding an adjective "new" in front of establishing or after establishing, but we're establishing a fixed infrastructure charge. I want to make sure that folks know that it is new. Establishing, I think inherently should give that message, but I don't want to make us, susceptible to any sort of, claim or argument later that, oh, this is new, you didn't say it was new, it wasn't clear enough. So do we think that, we can make it as clear as possible?
I think based on that feedback, what we'll put in the notification to customers of the 218 protest ballot is just, this is a new charge.
Yeah.
And we'll just put it in its own sentence.
Okay. I think that's great.
Any other questions? Just to follow up on Mayor Pro Tem's comment, I think it would also be good if we let them know what that charge was for, not just to say infrastructure as a all-encompassing, because I do know that we have some residents left over from our bond who thought that the infrastructure and what they were raising that water bond for was for the pipes. And
Sorry, Mayor, to cut you off. When you and I discussed that initially, we have been working actually with the Assistant City Clerk and her staff on how we're going to post this online on the transparency portal, and where we can direct people to get additional information. And we've included that link in the notification process. So hopefully we can educate people both by the mailing but online and through phone calls as well. And it's a point well taken.
thank you. Do we have any public comment on this item? Our public has dwindled. Chief, anybody? We'll take public comment from the staff now too. No? Okay. Bring it back to council. What's your pleasure?
I just wanted to thank Mayor Pro Tem Herabedian for bringing this up. I mean, it looked so nice. It was good. It was comfortable. But I think as we're looking, even with this plan, you're still looking at 5 years to really replace those urgent areas of concern. So we need to consider something a little bit more aggressive, and it is at a higher cost, but I think when you're looking at the long term, this plan makes better sense.
Yeah, I'd like to just thank the Water Subcommittee as well for all their work and for coming up with a rate structure that the more you read it, just makes intuitive common sense. And I think that, again, I just had so many moments of like, why haven't we been doing it like this before? So good job.
Those too.
Yeah, and those are nice moments to have, rather than the other way when we should be going back to.
And I think it's easy. right? It's
Yeah.
an easy plan to understand. You don't have to have, you know, a doctorate degree to figure out how much you have to pay for your water.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
I do like this.
And thank you, staff, for coming back with the revised numbers. I think it's always good when you're shaving 20 years off of, you know, your replacement time. So, or on each different category there. So,
If I could just jump in, this is what our public wants. I know they want it. They've been telling us they've been wanting their pipes fixed for a long time, and we just haven't had the financial wherewithal to do it. And I feel like now we are moving forward with a new plan that's not just making incremental improvements, but I think we have the light at the end of the tunnel ahead of us. I think we now know that we're going to eventually have a completely revitalized water system. And it's not going to be tomorrow, it's not going to be next year, but it's foreseeable. And I think that's a major change, may even be historical for the city.
And again, I'm just glad you brought it up, Councilmember Harabedian. I mean, I just apologize. I get kind of lost in the numbers sometimes and really just didn't see the forest for the trees here, that it was still 8 years to replace the urgent. So, you know, 4.6 years is more reasonable. And I look at the cost, I think is going to be about $15 extra, $16 extra for the bi-monthly. And when we go to monthly, that cuts that in half, and I think it feels even better, $8 a month to basically double the rate of replacement to get to the stuff that's in really, really bad shape, you know. So I think this is very responsible. And so, I mean, are we all on the same page as far as Proposal 3? Yeah. So, yeah, and I just think this is just a good example of just deliberation, how, you know, we're working together and get good ideas from everybody and just do the right thing here. And again, I want to give the staff a lot of credit for, you know, coming up with the simple proposal about the 2 tiers, too. I mean, really, I think that was staff that, you know, was the brainchild of that. So I'm really happy with what we have here. I think it's, I'm going to feel good as a citizen knowing that we have finally stopped kicking the can and we're actually doing something about it. Yeah, and stepping up. And it's like there's no free lunch here. You know, you're not going to get pipes in the ground if you don't pay for it. And I think this is a reasonable amount to pay every month in addition to what you're paying now to leave our future generations in a much better shape.
And I see Director Reynoso there. Is there anything that you would like to contribute to the conversation tonight? And you've waited and you've been sitting in the front seat and everything.
It's a really exciting time, and I'm really happy to be here and to be part of this process. And again, looking forward to, you know, the next 5 years when we can get rid of those critical pipes that are failing. So thank you.
Thank you. Okay, what do you need from us?
So, Mayor, this is a 4-part recommendation, and it will also set July 31st, 2018 at 6:30 p.m. for the public hearing as required for Proposition 218. We'll start sending out the notifications on Thursday. And for tonight, in order to do that, we need a recommendation, or all 4 of staff recommendations to be adopted as written in the staff report.
Subcommittee.
Can I just make one more comment, though, about the notice that's being sent out? You've got a statement here. It's unlikely that the city of Sierra Madre will be able to meet the water demand of Sierra Madre residents through locally produced water alone in the foreseeable future. But you really don't say why that is. I mean, should you just put something in there because of depletion of our local aquifer and leave it at that? At least there's something there to say why that is, because, I mean, for 100 years we've been relying on that water supply.
Yeah, absolutely, yes.
Then I just have one more nitpick, if you will humor me here, is at the bottom of, I'm not sure which page this is. Oh, it's the first page, attachment B. It says, the proposed rate adjustment establishes an infrastructure fixed charge and impacts rates for both the fixed meter costs. Can you change that, please? Stop calling it meter costs. What did we call, you know?
So we can call it a fixed charge and refer to it. It's referring back to what it was called in the previous water study, which is
How
why.
about just call it call it the fixed cost, leave the word meter out.
What's your objection to meter?
Because we've had over and over, it's just stuck in my brain of certain citizens coming up and saying, how could we be paying that much for a meter? A meter costs $200 and you're charging us $50 every month. And
That's
I
really
just
true.
got so sick of it because the problem is what we're calling it. It is not a meter charge. It's a, you know.
Charge.
It's an infrastructure charge.
Yeah.
So call it something else, please.
We can change that, absolutely.
Thank you.
This is Exhibit B, you said?
Yeah.
That's it. Well, Water Subcommittee, hopefully, this is your call on these motions.
Yeah,
You did all the work on it, so I'll stay quiet.
Go ahead.
Okay, I don't have my motion in front of me. What is it? I'm sorry. So lost in the details here again.
Meter charge.
So, well, where's the recommendation?
It's up in the staff report. Paper.
Okay, so,
Got it.
yeah. I move that we adopt the comprehensive water and wastewater cost services study as amended. Direct staff to initiate the Proposition 218 notification and ballot process. Approve the supporting documentation and set the date for the tabulation of protests for July 31st at 9:30 a.m. and 6:30 p.m. for the public hearing.
I will second that.
Friendly amendment, just the accompanying or supporting documents as amended?
As amended.
As amended.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? They all carry. Thank you all.
Nice
Good job. Nice
Do
job.
we have any future agenda items?
The mayor and Councilmember Arizmendi already agendized the issue, the wastewater issue that Councilmember Capocia talked about, right? So
Yeah.
we don't have to form it, okay.
July 10.
But I would like to remind, just it was months ago, I asked, I'd like to know where we're at with the Kirsten Court project.
Yes, we.
Forgot to bring that up Monday and talk to you.
We've requested that information from the Community Services Commission. They are making progress, and when we got into budget, we had asked them to hold off. So the delay is my fault. We wanted to get through a lot of this work first.
Okay.
Okay, so we can bring maybe that back.
Yes.
Can we also, I've been getting so many emails about houses being demolished, and is there any way that we can do a report? Is there an increase in houses being demolished? Are they being demolished and they're following our code? Are there any houses that aren't, have been denied, that kind of thing?
Yes, we can provide that report.
Any other future agenda items? If not, who wants to adjourn?
I'll move to adjourn.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Meeting adjourned.
Great
Thank
job.
you.
I thought this was, we
I
had
know, I
snacks.